look, I've been advising and investing in the private equity markets in Africa for about 10 years. And I think the reality is that it's been a difficult market over the last 3 or 4 years after the initial euphoria in the early 2010s, where a lot of people put in a lot of money and a lot of deals. I think you may have heard yesterday, I think it was Danladi or Hygen from Barod saying that 80% of GPs in Africa are not going to make their carry. So let's not fool ourselves that it's been a tough market. But I think the reality is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I think if you look at a long game in Africa in terms of demographics, in terms of where it sits within the global stage, I think Africa as a market has still a lot to show, and returns will come. But you know, it's not been an easy ride. I'm always an optimistic person, so we have to move forward with optimism. Okay, so I think the reality is that no country, whether in Africa or the rest of the world, was spared the ravages of the pandemic. And you know, whether it's supply chain issues, currency issues, you know, lack of people able to move out, everyone has been affected in some way or another. And it is interesting to look back and see how some countries actually had lockdowns and other countries did not have lockdowns, primarily because they just couldn't afford to have lockdowns. But the takeaway from all of this is that no one really knew what they were doing. Now we've got better data in terms of what works, what doesn't work, and hopefully all countries will now know that what they can do to actually free up the economy. Because the most important thing is to free up the economy, right? And to be able to get things back to normal. You know, whether it's tourism or moving goods, ability to do that is so important. And whether it's Africa or anywhere else, and I'm hopeful that, you know, with the lessons learned, things will ease up. You've got the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which actually promotes movement between African countries, which hopefully will also engender more development, more prosperity, and ultimately more opportunities for private equity. So I think, you know, with all these things, it's not one sector. I mean, Africa's got a massive deficit in infrastructure, so infrastructure is so key. But yet at the same time, the promises being shown by the tech sector is incredible. I mean, you've seen some of the, you know, I'm an investor in a bunch of Africa tech companies, and the interest that I've seen, whether it's Silicon Valley or Asia or China, into Africa tech is phenomenal. So I'm very bullish about that sector. What's required, however, is basic infrastructure. Okay, so because whether it's tech sector, whether it's agriculture, whether you need infrastructure to be able to move things, you need infrastructure in terms of information technology, you need infrastructure in terms of telecoms, IT, broadband, etc. So I'm still pretty bullish about Africa in the long term, but there are so many different moving parts, and you can't just say you just need one thing and it'll fix everything. They all will need to work together, and I think if you look at the basic level, you need the basic stuff. Electricity, health, education, infrastructure. And if you fix those 4 things, everything else will happen. So I'll go back to where I said, I think the tech sector has had incredible prominence in the last 1-2 years. And you'll see unicorns and soonicorns and half unicorns and etc. And there's a lot of excitement about this sector. There's a concern, there's a bubble, but let's not worry about that right now. There's a bubble all over the world, so Africa's no different to that. I think it's very exciting in terms of how private equity are now looking to move downstream into venture capital, right? Because the returns have not been there, let's be honest. Returns have not been there for private equity in Africa. Whereas if you see some of the early VC deals, the returns have been incredible, right? And, you know, but they're different models. And there are different mindsets in terms of whether you're a private equity investor or venture capital investor. So the question is, can you transition from being a private equity investor? I was talking to one of the private equity guys and they said, I don't understand venture capital. How can they do deals where you've got basically no information, right? But that's a different mindset. So what I see is going to happen is there's going to be a convergence between VC and PE. And all the PE guys are looking very, very closely at how do I get a piece of this venture space? Right? And can I still maintain, and effectively venture can become a feeder for PE, because at some point venture becomes private equity, right? Once you get enough revenue, you say EBITDA positive, etc., then it becomes a private equity deal. So that convergence between the two is super interesting, and I think will happen in the next few years, and I think I'm already seeing it.